I'm just going to do some housekeeping arrangements. Thank you for attending and welcome to this meeting of the Finance and Performance Policy Committee. My name is Zahira. I am the chair of this committee. The meeting today is open to the public. The meeting will be webcast and the recording will also be available for people to view later through the council's website. It's also possible that Sheffield Live TV will record and rebroadcast this meeting. Please can I request that mobile telephones and other such devices are switched to silent as not to disturb the conduct of this meeting. There is no fire test planned today. If there is an emergency evacuation, please take instructions from Town Hall staff. The assembly point is Tudor Square. There are no main items which require the exclusion of public and press. For the benefit of the webcast, please can each Finance and Performance Policy Committee introduce themselves, and I'll start with you, Gareth.
Councillor Gareth Slater, Southey Ward.
Good afternoon, colleagues. Councillor Eldor from Manor Castle.
Councillor Guillaume, Councillor for Firth Park.
Councillor Martin Phipps, Councillor for City Ward and Green spokesperson for the committee.
Good afternoon, my name's Diane Hurst and I'm an elected member for Richmond Ward.
Sheffield Mohammed Ecclesall.
Glynis Chapman, Mosborough Ward.
Councillor Mike Levery, West Ecclesfield and Vice Chair of the committee.
Thank you very much. Apologies were received from Councillor Terry Fox. There are no items which require the exclusion of the public and press. Is there any declarations of interest? No? Item 4, minutes of the previous meeting. Are we all agreed? You can find these on page 15 of the agenda pack. Yep, they agreed. Thank you very much. Item 5, public questions and petitions. We don't have any public questions or petitions. Item 6, there was a member question that was submitted by Councillor Hurst. Councillor Hurst did get a verbal update and also a written one. And do you have a supplementary question, Councillor?
I do, please, Chair. It's around the when the decision is going to be taken on fees at adult health and social care and the gap towards a statement, and if any preparatory work or Plan B work is taking place to cover that gap.
Thank you. Philip, if you can answer that.
Thank you. So we don't expect to get the final settlement from government until late December. The last possible date that could be will be the 19th of December, which is probably when we can expect it. We are expecting a statement from MHCLG, so the Ministry for Housing, Communities and Local Government, in November. That might be this week, it might be next week, which will set out sort of the broad policy parameters for the budget. So things like the council tax precept, fees and charges limits, those sorts of things will be in that statement. We won't get the exact details of settlement though until December at the earliest, and we think it will be late December. So we are working, as always, in sort of a period of uncertainty until we've got that final confirmation, but that's part of the budget process and we'll work with that. That's part of the reason why the budget papers will come in February as well as they're coming in December, because there will always be some changes between December and February.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Philip.
Thank you very much. Item number 7, which is on page 27 of the agenda pack, and this is the work programme. Councillor Dodd.
Thank you. Sorry, just finding the right page. I had a couple of questions. Firstly, just to note that we appear to have given ourselves quite a large agenda for December, and I'm just worried, given the importance of some of the topics under consideration, that we make sure that we give ourselves sufficient time for that and for all of the items that that's raising, and if necessary, think about what we might be able to do in pre-meetings. But I just wanted to draw particular attention to the Equalities Objective Performance Framework, which I see has been delayed again, which is a shame. But I wanted to ask, it says under the member engagement and public participation that because consultation has taken part on the objectives themselves, there isn't an intention for any further engagement. And I'm recalling from our previous discussion of the outcome framework that actually the targets we set and the way that we measure things makes quite a big impact on the way that the work itself is done and delivered. And so I'd be keen to see what consultation and engagement has been done, particularly with internal equalities groups, but also external parties who are interested in that agenda, just to make sure that they feel like the way that we're measuring progress on that, recognising it's quite a difficult topic to measure progress on, aligns with what the intentions were for the original objectives.
Thank you, Councillor Dodd. In regards to the next agenda, it is a very busy agenda, but you're all invited to the next pre-agenda briefing, so hopefully we'll get a lot of information to you guys at those meetings, so that when it does come to the Finance Committee, you'll already know what's coming and you've already had your answers hopefully answered. In regard to the consultation and engagement, we will pass that on to our equalities team who are doing that piece of work and get that feedback back to you in terms of who they are consulting internally. Councillor Slater?
Partially covered in the past one, but just wanted, so the council tax review for care leavers and the equalities objectives have moved back again. They were, I believe, due in October, so it's just why have they moved back? And then the other one, particularly with regards to the council tax policy for care leavers, and a newbie question, I'm afraid, when do we actually have to have that signed off in terms of if it's going to happen for the next financial year?
Okay, I think the last date for that one is the February meeting. Am I correct with that, Philip? Yeah. So that's when it has to be signed off formally here at the Finance Committee. So hopefully we have got time to do that. And sorry, what was the other question around?
Just what happened, why they were delayed again?
Just because the report, we sent it back for further information. Thank you. Okay, so are we, any further questions? No? Okay, so are we agreed with the work programme? Is that okay for now? Yeah? That's all agreed. Thank you very much. So moving on to item number 8, which is the capital approvals for month 6. And this is on page 33 of your agenda pack, and Damien Watkinson will be presenting for us.
Hi, thank you very much. I'm Damien Watkinson. I'm the Finance Manager in the Capital team. Just here to present the proposed amendments and changes to the capital budget that have been brought forward this month. Under Transport, Regen and Climate Change, we're looking for the approval of 107k of cash flow from corporate investment funds to develop feasibility on a 1.75 million scheme at Burngreave, regarding pedestrian accessibility largely, but with some improvements also for cycling and buses. The overall scheme will be funded by Active Travel England, but there's certain pre-works that need to be done in order to get the bid together for Active Travel England, which is why the initial cash flowing is proposed. There's some proposed reprofiling of the grant budgets for clean air zone grants for buses and coaches and heavy goods vehicles, approximately 3 million to be moved into next year. This is because the central government have paused the retrofit technology movements on buses while their effectiveness is decided upon. So there's been no grants made further grants made under that programme. And HGVs, the demand has been particularly low in that area, and data suggests that the majority of the fleet is actually compliant, so there's not been as much demand as expected. So they're looking to reprofile those budgets into next financial year, while discussions take place with the government about how they may be reallocated to make best use of those resources, dependent on the outcome of the review of the bus retrofit technology. The A625 Safer Roads scheme, we're already in receipt of 1.425 million from Department for Transport. This is just to increase the feasibility budget in order to make sure it's sufficient so that we get a robust cost estimate for the interventions outline business case stage. The Heavygate Road Crossing scheme, this is following on from the Active Travel Neighbourhoods programme that went on, there was a temporary crossing in place at Evergate Road, was to be made permanent. They're increasing the budget on that to 268k. There've been an oversight, and they've not included the costs of the ongoing temporary hire that had to take place of the equipment until the permanent solution was put in place. The Cycle Support Infrastructure Scheme is a rolling programme we have of small interventions to improve cycling infrastructure across the city. We're looking at things like bollard alterations, cycle stands, wayfinding paths. An increase of 80k for this year added to last year's slippage will give a budget of around 144k for that programme of works. The Crooks Valley Safety Scheme is asking for an increase of 57k to cover additional prelim design costs and moved to detail design costs on that particular scheme. I'd just like to say members have raised previously that transport schemes seem to keep returning for additional funding, and I think I've mentioned before at this meeting it's something that we've started to address with colleagues in transport, and while I've always said there's always going to be a level of variation within capital schemes, and that's inevitable. We had noticed it had become more frequent. So we'd started to work with transport colleagues to ask them to be more robust at initial business case stage, so that feasibility stage. Make sure, firstly, they request enough money to do the feasibility that's needed, and to make sure that so that those costs that come back then at outline business case stage, so the full cost of the scheme, are robust and don't require additional costs when they come back for the final delivery. We've pushed back already on some this month that came forward, where we thought, you know, the calculations probably weren't sufficient, and we asked for more work to be done on some business cases. So just to let you know that that's happening. We've got a senior officer in transport now reviewing all the business cases before they come forward. So we're hoping that that's going to start to address that issue as well. And they've also informed me that the pricing resource within our delivery partner, Amy, has been increased, which will give them more access to more accurate costings at an earlier stage. So over the coming months, we're hoping to see this situation improve, hopefully, quite dramatically. There will be still some, because there is a gap between initial business case and outline business case stages, there will be some that still flow through. I still think we'll see a couple of these schemes of this nature coming forward, just asking for a little bit more money. But it's just to make clear to members now that, yes, there's a couple more come through for approval here, but these are the measures that are being put in place. So I just wanted to say that now, so that, you know, people are aware. Because like I say, I know it's an issue that has concerned members. So I just want to make that clear that that work is ongoing, and hopefully we should see the results of that. Carrying on then, after the transport schemes, we've got a couple of levelling up fund schemes that are coming through at Attercliffe. There's an additional 233k, so giving a total budget of 370k into some remediation works at the Don Valley site. Initially, it was going to be a larger scheme that was going to level this land in preparation for a development of an innovation centre. That's no longer progressing. It was looked at about possibly just levelling the land, but it's been identified that the remediation cost of that would be over £1 million due to higher levels of contamination in the ground than we thought. So at the moment, that land is going to be fenced, made safe, and rewilded. So, you know, meadow flower planting and just made into a safe green space. The largest element is, members may recall, in July, they approved the disposal of land to the Sheffield Children's Hospital Trust regarding the development of the Child Centre of Health Technology. This now is the passporting of the remaining grant over to the Children's Hospital Trust to actually get on and build that scheme. So that was part of the Levelling Up Fund bid, that we would passport those funds onto them. And in the Appendix 2 to the report are the brief details of the grant agreement that we'll be entering into in order to deliver that. At Devonshire Quarter, we have an allocation that's been in the capital programme for a while about acquiring sites there strategically so that they can be ready for development. We're proposing the reprofiling of approximately £1 million of that budget into next year. It's not yet clear whether we're going to need to purchase as the final site in that area, or whether that might actually go ahead or by a private developer, but we want to keep that allocation intact if that's the case. There's also some remediation works that we're doing at Thomas Street, Hodgson Street site, and some of those works will occur next year as well. So that's why we're looking at that reprofiling. Community parks and leisure, doing 30k feasibility to look at the cost of reinstating the footpath routes around the Rivelin Valley area following the floods. Some of the stepping stones washed away, and it's a well-used site. So, like I say, initially 30k coming from the local transport plan, that the work's going to be carried out under Parks and Leisure as part of their remit for green spaces. Also, members may recall we accepted a grant for 1.1 million a while ago for species survival in the Shirebrook Valley, which is numerous works really to help reintroduce species into that green area. This is first stage of that. It's going to come through in stages as pieces of work are agreed. So the first one is around 263k added to the species survival grant. We're also putting in some funds that have been accessed from landfill tax, etc. But this is just for stage one of that, so we will see several of these come through as the year progresses. Under housing, we're putting in for this year 100k into district heating for breakdowns. There's been a couple of breakdowns occur already, and they just want to put 100k in to cover those, and also leave a small contingency for any more that may occur in the next in the remainder of the year, with a view that an allocation on a year-by-year basis will be identified in the future years of the HRA business plan. So the largest element on the housing scheme this month is the Elemental and Voids programme. So what this proposes to do is put in place a new contract which is going to deliver the replacement of kitchens and bathrooms up to the Decent Homes standard following the completion of the current contract that's in place. But in addition to that, it's also going to address the voids works that have fallen behind and try and get a good grip on that and get more properties back on renting quicker. So what we're actually looking at here is £30 million, which would be over 5 years. But just to be clear, the contract that we're awarding is a 2-year contract initially, with the option to extend for additional years up to 5 years. So that's what we wanted to put in place. It's been an attempt to generate as much value as can be out of a contract by awarding to a single contractor who we can manage carefully on those. So that's all from the allocations from the HRA business plan that's obviously is approved annually. So the costs of that were included in there. But it's we just want to put this allocation in now in order to provide that certainty of these works occurring, so that we can keep that Decent Home standard and also address the backlog in the voids area. Education, children and families. We are doing some feasibility work on improving changing facilities at Waterthorpe Infant School to address some of the special educational needs that are there. We're making a grant to Five Rivers Trust in order for them to provide 10 additional places for excluded pupils in order to meet our statutory duty there. Watercliff Meadow School, we've been doing some work on the retaining walls there, where there have been some safety issues on that. There's an additional 100k required there because ground conditions have been found to be less favourable than thought when we first went on site, and also there have been some additional works to an adjoining property that have been required. There has been a saving, however, on the halfway flat roof scheme of around 50k, which is now going to be returned into the overall pot for schools condition allocations. And I think that's everything.
Thank you very much, Damien. There's a number of people who want to ask questions. So, Councillor Chapman first.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Right, Damien, I've got a few questions here. So, going back to page 39, 40, 42, these are all increases in either feasibility studies or budgets. Why can't companies come to us with a proper figure? Every time they're coming back for asking a bit more money because they've forgotten to do this or forgotten to do that. Why can't you get companies to actually give you an upfront figure and stick to it. If that's a contract and you've agreed that contract, then you fulfil it for that money. Don't keep coming back to the council. That's one thing anyway.
Do you want to come back on that one first? Or? Right, so in this case, it's not actually, this is not where the price has come back and then it's gone up. This is where Transport colleagues have done the design work and estimated a cost, and that estimate's been out of whack when actually the final costs have come back from Amy effectively for the work to be done. So it's not about that price has been sort of come in and then, oh, the contractor said it needs more. It's actually been our initial estimates that have been incorrect.
So we've got it wrong and not the contractor.
Yeah, it's much more that way, yeah.
Okay. Right, then. Page 49, district heating breakdowns. I have seen a presentation about this in a local CAG meeting, and my worry is that feasibility studies are being done by perhaps, I'd like them to be done by companies without vested interest. I'd like to think a company coming in to look at the district heating and what you're going to replace it with for the future has interest in heat source pumps, solar, wind, everything, not just one item.
So I would say, well, this particular approval is about breakdowns. So this one is just an approval at this point.
Just for the future, going forward for the future.
Yeah.
Right. And just a nice comment, really. Page 56, Waterthorpe School, SEND provision. I'm really pleased about that. Lots of problems with from parents asking when could things be improved, and I'm glad to see that that's happened. And just as a side, although local councillors would have preferred Peaks College to have been joined, as it has been in the past, SEND and sixth form provision, I've always been critical of the amount of money we've spent at Peaks College to turn it into a SEND provision. But I was lucky enough to go to the reopening of Peaks College for SEND, and can see where the money's been spent. I was really pleased to see the children, young people looking really happy. And as an aside, they all turned up on the tram, which was brilliant.
Thank you.
Excellent. Councillor Slater.
I've got three groups of questions, so I'll do them in three bits just to make it a bit easier. So page 38, I get the bit about buses and coaches that basically we're waiting for that. But on the heavy goods vehicles one, I guess, why do we think it's going to happen next year if it didn't this year, if we're already saying that they're already meeting the requirements? And what has already been allocated to 25-26 that this is going on top of?
Right, I can't remember off the top of my head what's already in 25-26 because we did do some reprofiling of it earlier this year already, so it's fallen behind again. In terms of why we're just moving them in their current allocations, it's because the discussions are still ongoing, I think, with Central, as far as I'm aware, with colleagues in transport, with Central Government about how we might reallocate it. So if we don't need as much for HGVs, could it possibly move, could it be moved to the buses? But we don't have that decision yet. So at the moment, those allocations are going to stay as they are. It might be that whatever the outcome of the bus retrofit is, if the decision is actually we need to electrify buses, that's more of a cost. It might be that some of that money moves between. But I think those discussions are still ongoing between colleagues in transport and the Joint Air Quality Unit where we get the CAS funding from.
Okay, well done on the first one. Second one, I'm glad to hear you talking about officers reviewing the cost increases. This is page 40 to 42. That's good because some of them are coming back as considerable. I guess, can I just have the terms of reference of what they will be looking at, the sort of flow chart they're using for those discussions so that we can see what they'll be looking at?
Is that for the transport schemes, about how they're going to be considered? Yeah, I'll speak to colleagues on that.
That was easy. Right, third one, I'm afraid not so easy. Right, let me look at my notes. So a couple of things on this one. One, and this is probably most important, so I'll ask this one first and then, has this been signed off by either full council or the housing committee?
Oh, sorry, which?
Sorry, we're on page 55 to 59. This is about the housing authority money. Sorry, not housing authority. housing. Yeah, where's it gone?
Yeah, so overall, the HRA business plan is signed off annually, and that just includes allocations broad allocations for themes of work. And this has just been a drawdown from those themes of work. So each month, as I bring these forward in this format, what you'll see is a housing scheme, a specific scheme, and then there'll be several entries behind it which say like block allocation for health and safety, for internal works, etc. So each month, I don't usually refer to those, but effectively that's just as showing that these were the block allocations that were allowed for in the HRA programme. These are being reduced in order to deliver these schemes so that we don't move outside the overall envelope that the HRA business plan approves. All we're doing is allocating money from those pots, if you like, that have been identified in the HRA business plan, and so it's showing how we're allocating them to specific schemes. So while the detail of each individual programme or each individual scheme won't be in the HRA business plan, we're just working within the envelope that we're provided.
I was going to say, if it assists, the HRA business plan was considered by Housing Committee in December 23, 14th of December. It was then at Strategy and Resources on the 24th of January and approved by full council on Wednesday the 7th of February.
I was here before I was, that's why. Okay. In terms of the other things, so one that concerned me is on page 54/55. We're taking £2 million out of essential work. Surely if it's essential, we can't take anything out of it. What does that other essential work cover? Then the other one, you were saying it's a 2-year plus 3-year contract, an option to extend it for 3 years.
Well, 1 + 1 + 1. So.
Okay, that was exactly my question.
Yeah.
Thank you. And then, yeah, that was it.
So, yeah, on that essential, what we're saying is the allocation for other essential works being reduced by 2,000 is being contributed towards the the main 30 million contract. So we're putting a little further down on that entry, there's a budget, there's a table which shows how that 2,000 has been taken out of there and shows that there's 13.7 million remaining in that allocation, if you like. So while 2 million's come out of that allocation, there's still 13 million in there. Yeah. So what it's showing is how each of those allocations come down, and as I would say as well, the HRA business plan will be coming forward for another refresh. It's annual refresh this year, and all these allocations will no doubt shuffle around again on the basis of priorities as they're seen by the asset management team.
Sorry, just to clarify that, what are we losing out of the... I get that there's still a fund there, it's just being reduced. What are we losing from that other essential work because of that £2 million? What are we losing?
Oh, no. It will have been intended to be used for these various projects. That's what these allocations are for. So it was, each time we bring something forward, it would be drawing from some of these allocations. They might not have always had in mind the definite schemes that were going to come from each block, but that's how they've chosen to break it down. So it's not that you're not choosing not to do something, if you like. There aren't a set of schemes or a fully costed set of schemes all ready to come out of that money that this particular scheme's impacting on. It's just that this is one of the sources of funding for that particular for this particular programme of works. Does that make sense?
Thank you, Councillor Slater. Councillor Mohammed?
I've got two questions. I'll take one at a time. First one's on page 49. It talks about district heating breakdowns, and in particular 49 properties on Jamaica Street and 32 properties on Carwood Road. Given we've got a yellow weather warning, do we have an alternative in place if these systems are currently broken? I don't know if you can answer that, Ajman.
I believe that's work that's already taken place on those. So that was an allocation that's been put in place in order to cover that. And then what's remaining in that allocation for this year will be to cover any further ones. If work's required urgently, obviously it'll take place, and they're looking at putting a strategy in going forward, you know, a longer term strategy, but it's effectively this year's a sticking plaster to get us through this year while they discuss, you know, the rest of the business plan again, which is coming for its next iteration, and what allocations they might put in for this meeting.
Thank you, Chair. And the other questions I had was around the reprofiling of the CAS grants. You talked about heavy goods vehicles and the buses, and clearly some people are not required the grants because they've already made the changes. Are those companies allowed to get some financial support because they've done the right thing, or is it a case of you've got to get the grant first and then change the vehicle? They apply, you know.
I must admit, I'm not aware of details of the grant scheme, but I can find out. For you. Yeah, I did a little bit of research on initially for some work that for a question Councillor Levery just asked me prior to the meeting, and I was looking at the levels of HGV compliance were already quite high, you know, even before the grant regime. So it's gone up. But yeah, I can find out if there's anything.
And then the other follow-up I would have on it is that what's the situation for the taxis? How much of that grant is left to allocate, and how many outstanding applications? But if you're going to do the inquiry, can you chase that up for me as well?
Is there a facility to apply retrospectively, and where are we on taxis? Yeah.
And would we be looking at reprofiling taxis if required next year? Okay, thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Levery.
Thanks, Chair. I'm back to the Elemental and Voice programme, Damien. The first question is, why has it taken almost a year to get to this point? Having approved it at the this year's HRA business plan, so it's taken 9 months to get to the point where we're actually doing the financial allocation. And secondly, when you move the monies out of the blocks into the main budget, is it managed on an individual basis, each element, or can you via money between them, depending on priorities? Is that how is that going to work? Thank you.
So that's something obviously we leave to colleagues in asset management team. They provide us with what they think is required for the investment programme, and then what we do is we put these into our budgets, and that's what we monitor against. If again, that becomes a service decision if they need to reprioritise anything, if they said they needed to move an allocation from externals, for instance, to health and safety. That's something that will come here as part of, as part of that, we'd probably bring that through as an approval, because it's effectively just moving a budget around, but it's something that we'd bring through this committee if people were wanting to do that. In terms of why it's taken so long, there was an existing contract on kitchens and bathrooms that was running down. So I think it's been just a process of wanting to try and get those two to sort of mesh, if you like, so that as one contract ends, it's managed to close, this one's coming to pick it up. So I think that's how they've come to the timings of it.
Thank you, and thank you to colleagues. A number of my substantive questions have already been asked. I had a question which I think probably connects the really helpful update you gave us about the kind of overspends in transport feasibility studies and the work that you and colleagues are already underway with, which I really welcome, and the conversation we've been having about the HRA. Obviously, and this is more of a process point than a substance point, in this committee we're thinking mostly about the kind of the financial aspects of it, but conscious that at least in the case of the HRA, it doesn't sound like that's gone back to the Housing Committee that approved the business plan prior to coming to this meeting. It doesn't sound like there's been any kind of briefing of them or update to them. And similarly, I'm guessing in the transport example, I'm not aware, there wasn't anything in the papers about where that's been briefed to the Transport Committee prior to coming to here, which makes it quite difficult for us to talk to our colleagues on those committees and say, is there anything we need to be worried about? Does this number sound roughly big enough? Is this kind of going in the right direction? So I just wondered if part of thinking about the way that we're conducting preparation for these conversations, if it would be possible for us to make sure that even just a written note goes to those committees where it's significant, and I guess I'm particularly drawn to those because we're looking at a 200% overspend in that feasibility study and 30 million quid on HRA. Obviously, there's a lot in this, and if it's quite small scale, it's not maybe a good use of staff resources, but those things that are quite significant, I think that would be helpful.
I mean, I am aware that, well, according to my colleagues in transport, that the most recent briefing to most recent report to TRC, where they give them the update on the local neighbourhood complementary transport programme, did include the increases that were required on these various schemes. So yes, that's what I was told. I did try and include some wording on that, you know, to ensure that each policy is being informed. But we also have the annual capital strategy, which you know, each policy committee area approves their section of. So that contains like the pipeline of schemes that are going forward. So each policy committee area should be aware of, you know, what's planned in each of, you know, by each of the services and what's being delivered. But yeah, I will sort of try and get back onto, you know, ensuring that if we need to get a specific line from each person who brings forward a business case, that, you know, they've briefed members, which we do ask for. You know, yeah, are members aware of this? And if we're told yes, we will bring things forward. So there's not been, you know, nobody ever tells me that they haven't briefed anybody. So it's we do ask for that to be put onto business cases. So we believe that everything's been briefed through, but without policing it, you know, individually and then going back to each policy committee. So we do rely on services to give us that information in order to be bringing them forward here for approval.
Thank you, Councillor Phipps.
Thank you, Chair. Just an easy one, it's more of a comment really. Just around the species survival project in Shardwick Valley, just want to say, sounds like a really positive project there, improving the green and blue spaces and looking to address the decline in native species. So that's really great to see. It's good to see that it's a partnership approach with other organisations as well. So just congratulations to everyone involved in that good work.
And I'd just say that's a lot of hard work for the staff in Parks and Countryside, because like with it being a partnership and other bits of grant funding coming into it, so it's not been straightforward. So yes, thank you. I'll pass that message on.
Yeah, great work. Yeah, and I was going to say, yeah, it's great this attracted considerable grant funding as well. Just a process note as an aside for on the committee involvement section, I can see that it just lists briefing to the chair at the time. I guess normally I'd expect at least the chair, deputy chair and spokespeople to be involved in a briefing like that, as chairs aren't cabinet members. But yeah, congratulations and well done to everyone involved in it. Just thought I'd flag that from a process point of view.
Yeah, I think that links back to Councillor Dodd's question about that. So we ask that people bringing their business cases forward are content that they've undertaken sufficient briefings with members for things to be brought forward for approval here. So that's, you know, that's what we ask for. And if they've said that that's what's happened in that particular case, then they're saying to us that that's the sufficient involvement. Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Hurst.
Thank you, Chair. It's a question, it really follows on from Councillor Levery's on the Elemental and Voids programme. In response to his question, you said that one contract was naturally drawing to a close and the other one was intended to replace this. This is quite a lot of, it's a chunk of a contract, and I'm aware that I have constituents who have been waiting for elements that would probably be delivered under this this contract, and I'm aware of the issues that we've had over the previous couple of years with roofing programmes, and I wondered how much progress is it ready to go is what I'm going to ask. Do we have a degree of confidence in the contractor and know that we're going to be able to be seeing some very good news in our inbox shortly, that it's ready for awarding and there's a programme being drawn up?
Yes, as far as I'm aware, and this was one that was actually brought forward quite quickly because they did want to move so quickly on this to make particularly for those reasons. So yes, as far as I'm aware, although I'm not involved in those detailed discussions, the procurement exercise and everything's been really brought forward as quickly as possible to address these issues. It is the voids, it is the kitchen and bathroom replacements that people that are key and need to go on with. So yes, as far as I'm aware, that is the reason why this is here now. Because it was brought forward quite quickly through our processes. So yeah, as far as I'm aware, that is going to be something that hits the ground running.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. And just to comment to follow on from Councillor Phipp's comment, the species survival project is truly excellent. It's so good to go to there are some talented officers working on it, and it's really good to go to a steering group and see all these community and voluntary groups working together alongside officers to deliver something that's got such positive outcomes. So I just wanted to place that on record, how much valuable work it's doing already, and working in partnership with the community groups that have been pressing for this action delivery for years. Thank you.
Right, thank you very much. If there isn't any further questions or comments, I'd just like to add, on the Species Survival Shirebrook Valley programme, I should have declared an interest because I actually work for Sheffield and Rotherham Wildlife Trust, but legal have just had a look at it for me and said I didn't really have to declare because there isn't any funding that's going through. David, do you want to say anything in regards to that?
Yeah, it doesn't directly engage DPI, so it's not something that you have to remove yourself from the discussion for, but I think it is right that you raise that you do work for that organisation so that there's that transparency.
Okay, but I agree with Councillor Phipps and Diane Hurst. It's a really good project, and it's great to see so many partners involved in putting that together. That's really important. Thank you, Damon, for giving us an update in terms of the TRC colleagues, transport colleagues, kind of scrutinising budgets before they come to us, because the members were very conscious of the fact that we are nodding through, overspends without scrutinising them. So it's good that they'll be scrutinising them before they even come to us. So when they come to us, we are quite comfortable that the budget aligns to how much they need for that, rather than keep coming back to us for further money. But yeah, so thank you very much for kind of having that conversation with them. I just want to double check. So in regards to HRA, I know there were some questions today around the Voice programme and the fact that it hasn't gone to the Housing Committee for a briefing. But you're saying because it's in their business plan, committee members should have seen that already. And the same which goes for transport. But I agree with Councillor Dodd in terms of if anything is to come here, it might just be worth policy leads just informing their members that this is going to go through to the Finance Committee for them to approve, just so, because what we were trying to do, rather than keep coming back to you, Damien, you do a fantastic job on this and you can always answer all of our questions, and I'm really grateful for that, is us having conversation with colleagues that sit on other committees. And what we found was they hadn't necessarily been briefed, or even if it had, maybe it had been done quite a long time ago and people just weren't sure. So if they do get a bit of a note to say this is coming to the Finance Committee for approval, just so that they know that as well. All right. And then if they need to go back and look in their papers for that additional information, they can do that.
Yeah, I think there's probably a mechanism that I can adapt that we use for that provides information to directors that we could copy through to members. So I'll see if I can pick that up as well. Like I say, I think the onus sits with the people bringing the business cases forward, but I'll see if I can put in like an extra layer. If that
Thank you very much. Thank you. Okay, so this item has got items for approval. Are we all agreed? Yeah, that's unanimous. Thank you very much. Thank you, Damien. Moving on to the next item now on the agenda. This is Budget 2, Quarter 2 Budget Monitoring, which is on item 9, and you can find this on page 65 of the agenda pack.
Thank you, Chair. So, when considering this Council's budget forecast, the context of our financial position is one of significant funding reductions, which I'm sure we're all well aware of, which we've experienced since 2010. The core cities have not been isolated from these funding reductions, and Sheffield has seen 28% less funding. That's £858 per resident less as a result, which we've reported here as in previous updates through the MTFS. The demand for many of our services, particularly those that serve our most vulnerable citizens, continues to increase, particularly following COVID and the cost of living crisis. Along with the rest of the country, the council has been impacted by the effect of increased inflation, and we've seen the cost of delivering many services rise by more than inflation. So we've seen a combination of reduced funding, increased demand and increased costs. That results in the financial position that we report to this committee of the Q2 report of an overspend which is forecast at £34 million, a similar position to that which we reported in Q1. This is a serious position for the council to be in. Officers are working hard to find ways to reduce costs or provide services in different ways to reduce this overspend and limit overspends occurring in future years. What we aren't seeing is a persistent failure to deliver savings that have been agreed. The current forecast estimates that of the £43 million that were included in budgets through the budget setting process last March, £40 million will be delivered this year. That's a delivery rate of over 95%. Now, those savings do include additional grant income, but even if we strip those out, the delivery rate of savings is still just about 90%. So the main drivers for the overspend this year are similar to the pressures that we've faced in the past few years, and I'll hand over to Jane to talk through some of those.
Thank you. So, as Philip said, while the movement's not huge, the table on the bottom of page 67 gives a good overview of the position on each of the different committee budgets and the movement within the year. So we're now reporting an outturn position of 34.3 million overspent. So whilst it's not a big movement, there has been some targeted work from finance and service colleagues over the last quarter to understand the drivers of those cost challenges and some collaborative action planning to track and push for financial improvements. So the key issues are the same as we've been previously reported, with adult social care, education, children and families, housing and the finance and performance committees that have got the significant overspends. In adult social care, there's 9.5 million overspend, which is 0.6 million worse than the previous quarter. The issues really are 7.1 million within the purchasing budget, which fund the provision of care packages, with an additional 2 million in staffing overspends. The reasons for this is delays in implementing the actions that are detailed in the recovery plan that was presented in January. The actions are that the service is now re-evaluating some of those proposals to offset the slippage, with some particular attention to high-cost learning disability packages. In the Education, Children and Families Committee, the issues really are around the home-to-school transport provision, where we're reporting an overspend of 6.5 million, and this year with an additional 103 placements from September 24. There's also a 2 million shortfall in our integrated commissioning committee budgets, and in children with disabilities, we're seeing an increase in costs of over 1.4 million variance. So the actions there are SEN transformation work with partners in Power to really help shift the dial on the transport issues, with particular focus around promoting independence and independent travel. So engagement with the SENCOs in schools is the key to delivering change, and there's been a trial and a push for personal travel budgets. There has been some lower take-up than we'd hoped, which will feed into a revised engagement plan and with a push for improvements in that area. So there'll be more to come on that in the performance framework reporting, which will come to committee in December. In the Housing Committee, the general fund is overspent by 5.6 million, and the overspend is predominantly on the temporary accommodation nightly paid, where we were unable to fully recover the cost via our housing benefit from DWP, and we're subject to the shortfall. We're forecasting to support 300 singles and 90 families at this point, which actually, in the current month, we're actually seeing a reduction in the forecast, and the numbers that we're now seeing as of last month were 229 singles and 77 families. We're anticipating quite a large shift in that by the end of the year, so we are seeing some really good movement there. The actions in place that are causing that positive trend is really more resource and more support to stop at the front door, really, and that might sound quite difficult, but really that's about staying with relatives as well and staying with friends and making sure there's a support in place so actually people don't reach the temporary accommodation at the front door. So there's loads of work in there and we're seeing a really huge impact for that. There's also a significant amount of work in the Voids turnaround programme, and that's where we're seeing the shift in families come from. Unfortunately, there is a little bit of a knock-on impact there in the housing revenue account where we're seeing additional overspends in our housing repairs and maintenance service. Currently, that's reporting a 7.4 million overspend, with 5 of that in subcontractor costs, 2 million in materials and 2.3 in agency. The Finance and Performance Committee overspends are 6.1 million and the majority of that is in supported exempt accommodation and that's about £6 million where people are requiring additional support in their temporary accommodation. There is a task and finish group that are looking at all elements of this process from referrals and the commissioning and how people come into the service. We're also looking at the claims process and working with landlords to see where we can make some help become registered providers where we wouldn't be subject to the subsidy loss. The paper also references our budget process. We're currently in the process of developing and reviewing those savings and pressures with member groups, and there'll be a paper coming forward to the Finance and Performance Committee in December. The impact of the autumn statement's been included, but full details not yet known, and we're hoping to find out a little more about that later this month, if not December. The paper also contains 4 appendices. There's the detailed budget monitoring for each of the different committees in the first appendix, the capital programme monitoring in the second appendix, which Damien will come on to in a second. The third appendices is the treasury management, and just a few notes on the treasury management position. The capital expenditure funded by new borrowing has actually been lower than expected this year as a result of a lot of the slippage in the programmes. Our cash position has remained strong, and the average return on the investments that we've seen is approximately 5.28%, which is higher than the average rate from last year. Economic conditions in the first half of the year have seen the borrowing remain stable, with longer-term forecast expecting to drop gradually, which supports our delayed borrowing using our internal cash resources. So that's with options to look at short-term borrowing should liquidity become an issue over this period. The last appendix is a summary of our collection fund position. I will hand to Damien now, who will go over the detailed capital programme monitoring.
Thanks, Jane. Try to keep it brief and to the point, shall we say. We've got section 1, which shows how the budget's moved since last time we reported to a committee at month 3. So effectively, that's the result of the approvals that come through here each month. So overall, what that's seen is a 20 million increase in the 5-year horizon that the programme looks at, but a reduction of 62 million in the budget for this year. So the majority of that being in the housing programme, and there's going to be a further revision to the HRA business plan, as we've said, going forward. So the budget for the current year has come down from 255.6 million to around 193.6 million. Section 2 just outlines where we're forecasting to outturn against that. So we're forecasting now against the £193 million budget to outturn at 155.9. So that's 37.8 million below that revised budget. So what I would say is outturn's fallen by another 31 million since month 3. So the forecast outturn has come down by roughly £10 million a month. So where we've got that gap, the main areas are in housing, where it's the housing investment programme, so the external wall insulation contract has had significant issues, and the roofing contract, which hasn't been awarded, so all the allocation that was there for that has been slipped on. Under transport regen and climate change, the Castle site, the Levery Fund Castle site scheme reported this month a £5 million slippage on the current year's approval, with the overall completion date slipping as well to September 26. Other main ones have been the grants that we discussed, the CAS grants, and also the further elements of the Stocksbridge Towns Fund. So the later elements of that programme have slipped on again towards 25-26. Section 3 picks out the schemes that are forecasting to overspend, and there are the categories of those. So I would say that pick out the ones which are unless you're hopefully looking at it in colour, highlighted in red, are the ones where we potentially have an issue. So they are the mandatory DFG, Disabled Facilities Grants. So that reflects our known commitments against the current budget. But what we don't have yet is next year's confirmed allocation from central government. So while we're forecasting an overspend against our current allocation, that overall will be picked up from next year's grant. And once we have that confirmed, we'll put that budget formally in place. The Love Castle site I mentioned, as a result of that slippage, is now forecasting to overspend by approximately £1 million. There are still some issues to be ironed out on that scheme around the archaeology and the deep culverting. So there may be opportunities for value engineering, but also I think there'll be looking for additional grant funding, potentially additional gain share funding on that scheme. Transforming Cities Fund, Housing Zone North, that's a scheme that's on the ground, in delivery, and hopefully will complete quite soon, but is forecasting around 960k over. There's a change request to be submitted to the Combined Authority because that is funded from Transforming Cities funds, which are held by the Combined Authority. So what that will mean is there'll probably be some funds reallocated from the City Regional Sustainable Transport Fund schemes in order to be able to complete the delivery on this particular scheme. And then the Events Central scheme, which is another Future High Streets Fund scheme. So we're on a third tender exercise for this particular scheme. We're awaiting the full outline business case to be brought forward for what will probably be a scheme between 13 and 14 million pounds. There are proposals to go for gain share funding, so we've already got a strategic case approved by the Combined Authority. We now need to submit an outline business case for the full amount that's going to be required before we go into delivery on that one. So they're the key schemes that are forecasting to overspend and proposed mitigations for those. Forecasting is the next section. It's a continuing issue. We continue to challenge forecasts, providing information to project managers, showing them what they are spending, what they're forecasting to spend, and then what actually happens each month. And there's some graphs on there which show, we are regularly behind. Each month we forecast we're going to spend, 12 million, we spend 9. We say we're going to spend 15, we spend 10. I'm constantly feeding this back and asking for, improvements on that. But that's what's been driving the reduction in the forecast outturn, where obviously the spend's not been catching up. So that's why I brought some slippage. I think it was in July when we took around 50, 60 million out of the programme. And it's why I'm going to be doing the same again next month, where I'll be bringing another consolidated report saying, right, this will be the budget as close to the outturn as we can get, and reprofiling those costs. But it's this work that's driving that, and I'm going back to project managers, are you going to deliver this spend this year? And that's why 30 million's come off that forecast since month 3, and why I expect it to fall a little bit further. So just to make you aware that work's ongoing, and that's why these issues are occurring. So while we're forecasting to outturn at 155, I've got some models that project it could be still a little below that. And then just pulling together risk and issues really. Just saying the continuing high construction costs, that should be getting built into newer schemes, but it remains an issue for the schemes where we bid for funding pre-COVID and pre-Ukraine. So that's your Stocksbridge, levelling up funds at Castle and Attercliffe and Stocksbridge. All those bids were in, before major shocks to the market. And then, so those schemes are going to continue to suffer, but hopefully we should be able to build it into schemes going forward. Mentioned the council housing investment. The HRA business plan said it's being reviewed again, and there's work on stock condition surveys there that's going to sort of flesh that out and hopefully bring us a programme in the next couple of years that's more realistic and deliverable, that we won't be slipping so much on. Then overall, condition of estates, like the school estate, we get approximately £3.5 million a year for the school estate condition works, and estimates of that, actually required backlog works are in the tens and hundreds of millions. So it remains a risk that we don't have sufficient funds to be able to complete that work. And it's a similar position on the corporate estate, where we've got allocations at the moment that have been largely earmarked, as it were, and there are, from conversations with the service, there's around 50% of the stock conditions being done on the estate, estimated impact of about 96 million, which is only going to go one way, which is why the accommodation review is such an important programme that's going on. And then just, finally, the stock increase programme for council housing. So, again, that's suffering from higher tender returns, but there is a revised stock increase programme now that's been identified. There are changes, however, on the right to buy that were announced in the budget, which will have impacts on the various viability of schemes that come forward, and our levels of right to buy receipts. It's hard to know which way it's going to go, because with the level of discount coming down, our receipts might go down from right to buy that we can reinvest, but equally, because we're protected for a longer period, with the 30 years before people can get a discount, and the discounts are lower, by building new schemes may become more viable. So it's still got to work through, I think, until we see what the impact's been on actual right to buy sales. But I know there has been a bit of a spike in applications for changes before the new regulations kick in.
So just before we hand over to members, I think it's worth covering off sort of the risk of issuing a Section 114 notice. Are we at risk of doing that now? No, we're not. We've got reserves that have been set aside for this scenario. So we've got the budget contingency reserve and the housing benefit subsidy provision. That means that we can manage the financial position this year. However, using this amount of reserves this financial year does leave little room for manoeuvre in future years should an overspend of this significance arise. Therefore, it's critical that every opportunity to reduce costs is taken. This year's financial position underlines the importance of the work of Future Sheffield. The improvements to our digital services and customer experience will be the first parts of this programme to deliver. The programme will continue to identify ways for the council to deliver the right services in the best possible way, contributing to the economic growth of the city, achieving our city goals and delivering the council plan priorities. And there's a report on this at Strategy and Resources Committee later this week. Council officers are clear that this is not a comfortable financial position to be in. However, action is being taken to reduce the forecast overspend this year, and through Future Sheffield and the actions that we're taking to put the council into the right size and shape to be financially sustainable into the future. Other members of the council's strategic leadership team are present to answer questions from committee members on their parts of the organisation and the mitigating actions being taken to address the overspend. Obviously, we're happy to take questions from the committee. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Mohammed.
Mine's not a question, mine's more of a comment, in that in-year overspends, it's not a new thing. It's always happened. My experience has been over the last 20 years that usually the first quarter is where things start to slip. And by July, we get a grip and we usually try to bring it in on budget, if not just slightly over. Unfortunately, this year, it seems it's just been really sticky, and sticky in the sense that it's just been nudging up every year. And for me, particularly the point I think, Jane, you made about the fact that health and social care had a plan that was passed in January, and now we're looking at it now thinking, well, we're almost 10 months down the line, 11 months down the line. And, you know, as Philip said at the end, you know, we've got this one bit of money left now that's going to probably help us get over the line this year, but we simply cannot carry on like this. If budgets are set, then budgets have got to be adhered to. And if savings are proposed, then committees, if not this finance committee, will have to really be hard on people. Because otherwise all we're doing is noting overspends, but nothing's changing. Yeah, and we can't get to that situation where Philip tells us something else other than we can get over the line this year. Because we don't want to be in the situation that Birmingham are in and elsewhere, because that's not great for services. So it's more of a plea for people behind Philip to say that this year's budget, we might get over the line, but we really have to deliver on the savings that are being offered. And it's a job for all of us that we're going to have to be a lot more robust in challenging officers when they come with saving options, when we set the budget, to make sure that they're held. And yeah, just a bit of a grump, if I'm being honest, Chair.
That's fine. Thank you. Councillor Levery.
Thanks, Chair. A few things. Can we start with...
Sorry, I could turn that off.
Start on the capital side. I've got a real concern about 5-year contracts for major renovations where they're going wrong. I appreciate that what you're doing with this essentials work makes sense, to have 2 + 1 + 1 + 1, so that you can keep on top of it. But the roof replacement contract, which was a project from 5 years from 19 to 24, which collapsed in 20 and still hasn't been re-let. We just cannot carry on like this, because all it's doing is, you know, we're talking about maintenance. The maintenance costs go up, then they have to be recapitalised because they have to go on and do roof replacements. And now we have this problem with the area homes, another multi-year contract which is going wrong in year 1 and is going to have major surgery. Are we going to have a look at the way we procure these contracts, these capital contracts for renovation, where contractors are going bust, or either the contractor's not delivering, we're having to have a rethink, because we cannot carry on like this. We must have robust procurement processes that ensure these programmes can be delivered in full over 5 years. That's the first point. Maybe Damien.
I'm not actually involved directly in the procurement issues, although, you know, my colleagues are. I think it's due diligence is undertaken on the contractors, but unfortunately, in some cases, some contracts do fail, and it's the impacts of that are the worst thing, as you say, because it's on residents. So as far as I know, you know, our procurement procedures are robust, but I can't really comment much further on that.
Thanks, Jim. The other 2 points were education, children and families overspend, and home to school transport. I know we've tried the option of giving parents a financial stake in it, but to me it seems that the most important thing is to get some of these kids be able to become self-sufficient at the earliest opportunity in terms of getting from home to school. Otherwise, as we can see with the numbers going up and 1,000 more children since pre-pandemic, this is only going to continue to rise. And the best way to address it, and particularly in the 16 to 18-year-olds, is to get them independently travelling at the earliest opportunity. That's got to be the best way forward for them, so that they can be independent when they get to 18. And as many as possible of those that can go below that age and become independent, brought through, because otherwise we will have this overspend. But I think in the best interest of the kids, it's the work that goes on in the schools to get them travel independence that's absolutely a priority for me.
Thank you. So absolutely, part of the conversation that we're having, and this needs to be a system conversation, is how we make sure that children are travelling to school in the way that their peers do, that other people do, so that we're looking to make sure we're getting children to be as independent as possible at the age of 16 and at the age of 18. And that needs to be a whole city approach to that. Also making sure that our transport is fit for purpose to make sure that children can go to school in the best way possible. And we are looking at bringing through a range of different suggestions around that. Part of the issue, and you've pointed it out as well, around the home to school transport budget, is that the budget hasn't moved, but actually we're transporting more children, 31% more children as well. So that overspend is one which is difficult to manage, when actually we're doing more for the amount of money that is within the city. So in some senses, there's a positive around that, but there's also a fact that we absolutely need to be working as a city
connectivity to make sure that children are independent, that the first option is active travel, which is something that we would all support. The second is how parents are supported to get their children to school if there's not the ability for active transport, and then looking at other options. The second one is how you get to school on the bus, and you're using the zero Zoom travel, and then parents getting children to school as well. And also there's something about ages and stages. So certainly as a mum of primary children, I was taking my children to school and expecting my children to go to school by themselves at secondary age. So how do we make sure that that is an absolute norm for all of our children, and we're working collectively on that at the moment.
I've just one more, and it's one of my favourite topics: repair and maintenance and overspend. Yeah. Just let me find the reference.
The overspend.
Yeah, page 91, I think it is. But the reference is we're overspending again on a budget. When we've overspent in previous years, we put the budget up and it overspends, and this is a continuous year-on-year happening. And we have commented in the report that we need to sort this out. We're still spending a lot of money on subcontractors. So what is the underlying issue with this that is causing this problem? Is it performance of the maintenance team in-house? Are they delivering and meeting performance targets? Is it volume? Is it a combination? But there must be something there that we should be addressing that can get this under control. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for that. I think it's a combination of all of those things. And last time when I came and reported, we've got quite a detailed action plan and an improvement plan in place for the housing and repair service. I mean, one of the things I take a bit of comfort in is that the amount of backlog repairs is coming down, is going in the right direction. So that's really important. And also the level of customer satisfaction, which we measure on a regular basis across all of the indicators, they are also showing a downward trend, and people are more satisfied with them. So we have 2 consistent quarters where satisfaction level has been high. I think, the team are being productive. We're looking at performance in a great level of detail. We bring in additional contractors to be able to overcome some of those planned works that need to be done. So once we've got over that churn, I think we'll start to see, performance stabilising even further and budgets, being right-sized. That said, across the whole industry, you do find that when you talk to housing organisations, generally speaking, repairs costs have been going up for a whole range of reasons, and that is beginning to stabilise now, and prices are stabilising, so we should see that coming forward. We do need to right-size our budget as well, so we've been doing some work in relation to that, and I think you've had a good conversation about the capital contracts. The more of that we can do more efficiently, get those works done, the greater the benefit it will be to the responsive repairs side. So generally, sometimes you do find that our staff go out and they're having to do more work because we haven't necessarily invested in our property in the way that we should do. So it's a bit of a circular argument in one respect. If we don't invest long term, then that does have an implication on the responsive repairs. But I don't think we are wasting money. We are spending money in people's properties. That's really important, and we are improving performance. We're reducing the number of voids as well. That's going through the system. We've talked about homelessness as well, and again, I'm confident that the work that we put in place, the action plan that we put in place, will see reductions in costs over the coming weeks, months and years.
Thank you. Councillor Phipps.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the report and for everyone's work on this. Appreciate it. Just following up on a point Councillor Mohammed made. To be fair, I think at least my reading of the report is that as a council, so far it looks like we're largely on track to deliver the savings. I think on page 68 it said we've got 95% is our projected delivery of savings in the year. So that's not necessarily where we're falling down. It seems like we've got these major pressures coming in. Maybe that's underestimates on our part around how large pressures will be. But these are kind of large nationwide pressures. We're seeing kind of homelessness provision, like temporary accommodation, and where we're not provided funding, but we're obliged to provide it. Home to school transport, which we all know about, we need to do something about, but is a massive nationwide issue. Social care. And I just think, thinking about that and reading the report is quite positive about the budget we've just had. But these are all well-known, well-documented nationwide issues. And they look set to continue, and we look to still be facing them as pressures. So for me, that's kind of a real failing in the budget, because if we'd actually seen a positive budget, we should look at that and see some action being done on them. But it looks like we're looking forward to next year, and we're still looking at a potential gap of 30 million before we look at doing savings and stuff. So to me, that's not a successful budget. And I think there's also the issue that Councillor Hurst raised earlier around employer national insurance in members' questions. And although we might not be directly affected by it, we might be effectively compensated for the amount that we have to pay extra. There's that concerns that I think Diane raised around how does that impact other organisations we rely on, like care providers. And I don't know if anyone has an answer for that today. What happens if care providers pull out of Sheffield because of that increase? Where does that leave us? And what would the impact be on our budget from that?
Thank you. Good questions. So in terms of the national budget, I think we are grateful for some of the changes that are coming, and also the indication that we'll get a multiple year settlement coming in spring, I think, is to be welcomed. There are funding increases in there, some of which are targeted towards social care, and again, there's funding in the budget for education, for more funding for schools, more funding for schools capital. It's not enough. I think that's quite clear, and I think the sector's been quite clear in setting out how much and how big that shortfall is across the sector. But you know, as part of a national picture, we are sort of grateful for what we have. Could be worse. That's the voice of optimism, I think. But I think we will take what we get and do our best with what we have. We are expecting more funding for social care and for general services. Moving on to employees' national insurance, so the government have indicated, although we're yet to have something formal, that they will cover our direct costs for employees' national insurance. You're right to point out that doesn't have any indication of funding for any of our supply chain. Again, that's going to be an issue across the country. Care providers across the country are flagging that their costs will increase. They will struggle to deliver the amount of care that they currently deliver, and what the impact of that will be is yet to be seen. We're raising that with government and saying, in particular, care is a concern. And if there's no funding for that, there are big risks around the care sector.
I was just wondering also, do we know how the 2% cut to, is it MH, I'm going to get this wrong, MHCLG impacts us?
No, so that's the 2% efficiency target that the Chancellor set for all government departments. We're not clear whether that's a cash reduction in their actual budget and allocation, or whether that's some other measure of efficiency that they can deliver. Inevitably, we will hope to see the impact for us, if there is one, either in the statement that comes from MHCLG or in the settlement when that comes. It's really unclear.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Hurst.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to move on to something else now, having raised a number of issues and concerns. Thank you to officers for this report. It seems like there's been some very difficult conversations and acknowledgement of the position that we're in, and that there is actually a chance of delivering on some savings that we've tried to grapple with for all the time I've been a councillor, at least. But for me, one of the big difficulties, one of the squares that we still have to circle is the one around the increase in homelessness and temporary accommodation, and the fact that we can't recoup our costs from there, set alongside the fact that there are empty houses. There are houses standing empty, there are homes standing empty all across the city. And we know that the longer a property stands empty, the more its condition deteriorates and the more it is vulnerable to vandalism, and the more it is going to cost to put right. And that's one of the big issues for me, that we need to be able to get the most out of the homes that we own, to invest in, to give someone a safe, secure accommodation, and to invest that revenue back into supporting additional maintenance across the city. And we know, because we've referred to it, and there are a number of us have referred to it today, we know that national insurance costs are going to have impacts on our suppliers. We know that there are some contracts that have failed over the past few years and it's been difficult to replace them. How are we going to grasp this? It looks like we're talking seriously and putting things in place, plans in place for some of the other big issues. How are we going to get to the bottom of this one?
Maybe I should take that one. Okay. On the homelessness side, the work that we're doing is quite intensive, and we've included getting a critical friend in to be able to look at that, and we've got a detailed action plan that we're going to work through. One of the policy changes that we made recently was about how we allocate some of our properties on a sort of a trial basis, if you like. So more properties are being allocated to people who are homeless and in temporary accommodation. And already we're beginning to see the signs of success of that. So every property that's become available, more of it is going to people in priority need. And the more of that we do, the less there'll be in people in temporary accommodation going forward. The prevention work that Jane mentioned in her introductory remarks will also make a big difference in terms of how we deal with that. Another big thing that we're doing is we're investing in our staff and investing in terms of how they are actually processing applications and making sure that they're doing them as well as they can do, as efficiently as possible and in compliance with the rules and regulations. So, and a combination of other things. So all of the things that we're doing will mean that we should get to a number that we can manage because of utilising some of our existing stock and private sector stock as well. A separate piece of work is being done by our colleagues, Alexis, working with the team to deal with the exempt accommodation. So the work that they're doing there will also have a potential impact in terms of the shortfall between what you're getting from the housing benefits and what is being charged in exempt accommodation. So I think, we're reasonably optimistic with the things that we set in motion will have a significant impact on that area. On the empty properties, we're making considerable impact on that as well. So I know there used to be banded around a figure of around 1,000 properties being empty, and there were various council questions where we used to have that number. We are making inroads into that, both in terms of the voids that are coming up as people are moving transferring to the properties, but also some of those longer term ones. So we probably reduced by a quarter over the last few months in terms of numbers that we've got in voids, and that will improve month on month. And so that will again allow more people to be housed in those properties. It will reduce rent loss. It will increase income coming through. So those improvement plans will have a big impact in relation to our existing voids. And I think on the contractors, as we develop our stock condition survey, as you'll know, we've reported previously that we've got 2 external companies who are being commissioned to do a 100% stock condition survey, and that will provide us with comprehensive data in terms of what is actually required to be done in our properties. So at the moment, we're going very much on desk-based exercise in terms of component costs, and that's driving our spend profile. Once we have that data, we'll be in a better position to see, well, what's the quantum of the issue, how much is also required, how do we prioritise that? And as part of that process, what I want to be able to do is to look at how we procure contractors and have a much more of a strategic approach in terms of how we go about doing that and how we can profile work to ensure that there is sufficient interest for and volume for contractors to be, excited and interested in invest in Sheffield, and moving away perhaps from lots of multiple different contracts, which in itself has challenges in terms of how you manage those and resource those. So we're looking at that as well to be able to deal with the contractor performance. And contractor performance is an important thing as well, so making sure that our teams are, again, equipped to be able to manage that well and efficiently, whether it's within the asset management team or whether it's within our colleagues in CDS. So we are taking a very rounded picture in terms of how we deal with the totality of issues that, the pressures that we've got moving forward. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, just to make the point that the performance framework will come to this committee next month, and then in future we'll bring in finance and performance reports to the same committee meeting. I think that will help be able to have the qualitative data to support Ajman's points around the number of voids, for example, that we can track going down and see the impact that then has on the financial position.
Thank you. Councillor Dodd.
Thank you, and thank you for this report. I recognise what a difficult situation it has been, and no doubt will continue to be, at least in the short term. And like colleagues, we hear from residents every day about the things they would like us to be able to do, which we're simply not able to do, and have made some difficult choices to get us to this place. So I just wanted to recognise that. And I think rightly in this conversation, we've been focused on those areas that are still underfunded for the external pressures that we're facing. But just wanted to acknowledge the point that you had made in the introduction that 90 to 95% of the savings have been realised, which I think is really quite impressive. And I wanted to extend thanks to the teams across the council, but particularly those where they have been able to deliver the savings that they promised. And I recognise we're going to be asking them to continue to identify savings into the new year, and I would hope that they're kind of able to continue to be ambitious with what else they can find, and continue to perform well into next year also. I wanted to pick up on two comments or lines that colleagues have already started to explore. Firstly, on Councillor Hurst's comments about homelessness, and I really agree. I want one of the things that I'm keen that we think about is that almost all homelessness is preventable. And actually at the point that we're looking at TA, we're too late, and we've already cost both that person and our services an enormous amount more than they needed to. And many of the people who end up in homelessness have been through multiple iterations of state services, council, but also NHS, criminal justice, whatever it might be, before they end up in the worst of situations that none of us would hope to be in. So I do hope that we're taking an account beyond just your department, Ajman, of what we can be doing in the kind of preventative space, whether that's through working with criminal justice system and the NHS for people leaving prisons and care, or whether that's through support for our economy and for growth and all of that kind of stuff that will make sure that, in effect, that the costs are felt further upstream, which are much smaller per person than they are by the time we get to trying to house someone who's got into that situation. And then picking up on Councillor Phipps's comment about care, I think that is a really important consideration in terms of the costs to providers to the council. And I just want to flag the importance of our voluntary sector in that, who provide so much more than just social care services, and who have also been hit by lots of the cuts that the council's facing, and who have for many years now been able to cross-subsidise some of those and keep our communities ticking over, but who are now going to also face those additional costs which weren't budgeted for in the commission services that we have bought from them in the past, and yet they will need to find the resources to pay for them. So I hope that considerations going into how we can support particularly our anchor institutions in making sure that they remain financially viable through this difficult period too. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Levery.
Thanks, Chair. I was really pleased to hear, Ashman, what sounds like to me you're looking at a strategic partner to work with on the housing stock. I think this is a really important move, because when you've got an ageing stock and you're struggling with it, you do need the best of expertise alongside you to help you make the right decisions and get this done. So I'm really pleased to hear that. That's the first comment. Empty homes, I've always had a bean in my bonnet about empty homes, because we've now got in place a situation where if a home's empty more than 1 year, you're paying double council tax, which is a massive disincentive to actually do anything with these properties in reality. Because if you've got a property that you're leasing and the tenant dies and you have to clear it out and sort it out and eventually you decide to sell it, you can be guaranteed that may well take more than a year, in which time you're running into paying double council tax. It can't be right that people who are trying to get properties back on the market should get penalised for doing it. That is not the right way to go about this, and I'm going to bring this up again because I've got some stats which show that this first 6 months of this year, the number of empty homes since the policy was brought in has gone up. So we're not achieving anything with the policy of penalties. We need a policy of incentives to go with it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. There isn't any further questions or comments. Just like to say thank you to directors for being here today to be able to answer the questions. Thank you to finance colleagues. I know you're working extremely hard with colleagues across the services to look at how we can balance the budget for next year. We are not at risk at section 144, but we are in a very uncomfortable position right now. And I know there's lots of work that's happening behind the scenes, and we will all be shortly involved in our groups in the budget setting process, which is absolutely essential, that we are able to set a balanced budget for next year. It's a law, we must adhere to that. But I do appreciate all the work that you guys are doing in finance and your teams. And again, thank you to all directors for being here today to be able to answer the questions. This report does come with recommendations. Are we all approved? Yep, that's approved. Thank you very much. Thank you. Next finance meeting is on the 16th of December at 2 p.m. Thank you very much, colleagues. I'll see you then.